15 of the fantasy football season, and now many fantasy playoffs have started here this week. And here's a few quarterbacks I would start this week. The first guy, Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Jalen Hurts, he's been out the last couple weeks here, obviously with the bye in Week 14 for the Eagles. And then Week 13 versus the Jets, Gardner Minshew took over as the starter in that one when Hurts banged up with his injury. But now it looks like he's going to be good to go versus Washington football team in Week 15. And the Washington football team gives up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. So the last few games before Hurts missed Week 13. Week 10 at Denver, 178 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, and Intel 53 yards rushing. Week 11 versus the New Orleans Saints in that one, 147 pass yards, 69 rushing yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. And Week 12 at the Giants, 129 pass yards, 3 interceptions in that ball game for Hurts, and 77 yards rushing. So right here, each and every week, it's pretty much at least anywhere from 5 to 10 fantasy points that he's just going to get you in the rushing compartment. Here's Jalen Hurts. And this week, it's a good matchup on paper, but last week, the Washington football team played a great game versus the Dallas Cowboys and held down Dak Prescott and that offense for the most part. But I think Jalen Hurts, he gets going early in this one. It's a home game here for Philly, and he runs the football, like I mentioned, for those extra valuable fantasy points. And this week here, I like him as a start. The next quarterback's Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins. So this Dolphin team here, they've won 5 ball games in a row. And Tua, each and every week, it looks like he's starting to improve a little here in his second year in the season. So the last few games for Tua, Week 11 versus the same Jet defense, obviously, 273 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, and 6 rushing yards. Week 12 versus Carolina, 230 pass yards, a touchdown. And Week 13 versus the Giants, 244 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 rushing yard. So they had the bye week last week, him to heal up even a little more after coming off a rib injury early in the season. And right here, the Jets give up the 6th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. And right here, he's got some decent weapons in Jalen Waddle and Mike Gesicki, who we've seen have good games throughout the year here. So I think Tua, he's a safe bet in deeper leagues, in 2 quarterback leagues as a quarterback to start. And it wouldn't surprise me to see him get 20 to 23 point fantasy points in this one. The next quarterback's Taysom Hill of the New Orleans Saints. To talk about a quarterback that you're going to get a lot of bonus points from running the football and scoring touchdowns. He's going to give you an extra 7 to 10 fantasy points easily each and every week just running the football. I know he's not a great thrower of the football here, Taysom Hill, but obviously he's a hybrid type of quarterback as well. So in the 2 starts this season here for Hill, Week 13 versus the Cowboys, 264 pass yards, 2 touchdowns. He did throw 4 interceptions, but this guy ran for 101 yards. And then Week 14 at the Jets, 175 pass yards, 73 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns. So right here, Tampa does give up the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. And I think Taysom Hill, they're going to be trailing early and often, and he's going to look to run a lot in this ball game and try to control the clock as well here is this New Orleans Saints team. So it wouldn't surprise me if Hill cracks 20 fantasy points once again. And in deeper leagues and even 12-team leagues, I think I would be pretty confident in starting him this week, because with the rushing yards, like I mentioned, you're going to get a lot of points just from that alone here. We've seen it so far in the first 2 starts for Taysom Hill this season. The next quarterback's Kirk Cousins of the Minnesota Vikings. Kirk Cousins here, he's been a pretty solid fantasy quarterback this season, and he plays with one of the better offenses in the league, obviously, with a Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, and Adam Thielen, who hopefully will be back in this Monday night matchup at the Bears. So the last few games here for Kirk Cousins, Week 12 at San Francisco, 238 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, and into Week 13 at the Detroit, 340 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, a fumble loss in that one. And then Week 14 versus Pittsburgh, he didn't have to do much with Dalvin Cook running for 200 yards in that ball game, 216 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 windows, and 14 rushing yards. So this week here, the Bears give up the 3rd most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. And we just saw Aaron Rodgers put up a 40-burger versus them for fantasy football owners. And I think Kirk Cousins this week could get anywhere from 25 to 30 fantasy points. And he's definitely a quarterback I would start this week. And the 5th and final quarterback, I would start Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. So Dak Prescott, I said last week to bench him, and he didn't show up with anything for fantasy owners, really, in that ball game at the Washington football team. Only 211 pass yards, a touchdown, 2 and 15 rushing yards. But right here in Week 15, he's got a good matchup at the Giants, who Dak's owned throughout his career so far in the first 5 seasons of his NFL career. So the last few games here for Dak, it's been a struggle, no doubt about it. But with the matchup and the familiarity with the Giants, I think he bounces back with a good game this week. Week 12 versus Vegas, 375 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, and a 2-point conversion. Week 13 in New Orleans, 238 pass yards, a touchdown, and an interception. In Week 14 in Washington, he had the down game. But I think here, after a 2-game slump, this Cowboy team, they've still won the last 2 ball games. I think Dak here could bounce back and get things going. And like I mentioned, he's been good in his career versus the Giants. So that's a few quarterbacks I would start here for Week 15 of the fantasy football season.